We face a blatant act of Serbian expansionism and aggression.
Rivals in its intensity. The atrocities that took place in Central Europe in the 30s.
This is no more a civil war than Germany and Austria and Czechoslovakia had civil wars in the 1930s. This, as then in my view, is fascist thuggery on the march.
And what's going on is an atrocity.
In large concentration camps.
I think we should also be using air power. I think we should have been using it a year ago, a year and a half ago.
I was suggesting we bomb Belgrade. I was suggesting that we send American pilots in and blow up all the bridges on the Drina. I was suggesting we take out his oil supplies. I was suggesting very specific action.
Joseph Biden became the 46th President of the United States of America after modern controversial elections. And immediately he continued his unfriendly policy towards Serbia and the Serbs. On the day of statehood of Serbia, Biden wrote that he expects an early mutual recognition of Serbia and the pseudo-state Kosovo. This happens often after a war and a crisis in the country provoked by the intervention of the United States. American officials develop a profitable business there as soon as the situation returns to normal. General Wesley Clark thus became Kosovo's coal king, and Madeleine Albright runs the local telecommunications systems. At the same time, Joseph Biden chose for his dubious business a country richer in natural and human resources, a more strategically significant country than the certain Serbian region. When demonstrations began at the end of 2013 on the central Kyiv square Maidan, which soon escalated into bloody clashes between protesters and the police, Joseph Biden was actively involved in fomenting the crisis. Using the authority of the U.S. Vice President, Joseph Biden is forcing Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych to cancel a series of controversial steps that will cost him the fall of his power. Viktor Yanukovych dismissed the successful Prime Minister Nikolai Azarov, during whose mandate the country made a significant economic breakthrough and achieved an increase in the standard of living of the population. The foreign policy of the Azarov government was balanced between the West and Russia. In fact, he at some point decided to change the government and succumbed to the Biden's persuasions, the Poles and Germans who were urging to show this crowd goodwill and create a government of trust. It seemed to Biden that the displacement of Mykola Azarov was insufficient, and on February 9th he demanded from President Yanukovych to remove the Special Police Unit Berkut from the streets of Kyiv. 3 days later the Yanukovych regime fell. Power was taken by a group of putschists, and the first high-ranking foreign politician who arrived on an official visit was Joseph Biden. In 2014 and 2015, he visited Ukraine 5 times. Did these more than frequent trips have motives other than political ones?
It'd be very interesting to see the transcripts. We've got numerous phone calls from the vice president to Poroshenko showing up in Shokin's office and saying, Biden's putting pressure on me, you can't go forward with Burisma, can you slow it down? And all of a sudden, Shokin gets this communique from Latvia that shows a $16 million laundering transaction, classic laundering transaction. It goes from Ukraine to Latvia. It's disguised as a loan to another company, WireLogic, I believe. It then goes to Cyprus, gets disguised as another loan, This is called Digitech. And then it's dispersed as payment of board fees. Now, you don't make two loans to pay board fees unless you're laundering the money. $3 million gets to Hunter Biden that way. That is a straight-out violation of a money laundering statute.
The document referred here is an official letter dated February 2016 from the Prosecutor's Office of the Republic of Latvia, Money Laundering Investigations Division. The letter states, quote, according to publicly available information, Burisma Holding Limited and its director Hunter Biden are involved in a corruption affair, end quote. Latvia traced $14.7 million between 2012 and 2015. The funds were transferred back to Burisma to the accounts of Devon Archer and Hunter Biden.
The founder of the Burisma Holding is Nikolai Zlochevsky, Minister of Ecology in the government of Nikolai Azarov from 2010 to 2012. During this time, Zlochevsky managed to provide his company with favorable terms for the exploitation of gas fields in Ukraine. About 1/3 of Ukrainian gas sources today belong to Burisma. 11 criminal cases were initiated against him in 5 countries of the world, and he is also suspected of involvement in an international organized criminal group that legalized billions of dollars. At the same time that several criminal proceedings were being conducted against Zlochevsky, including the case of money laundering and illegal financial transactions in the UK. USAID, the state agency for international development, became his strategic partner. The United States and Burisma are jointly financing the gasification project in Ukraine, and even announced a joint competition for journalists. Negative reputation of Zlochevsky in business circles did not prevent the son of the US Vice President Joseph Biden, Hunter, who became one of the directors of Burisma with a monthly salary of $50,000. As we already know, the Latvian prosecutor's office suspects Hunter Biden and his close friend Devon Archer that they embezzled another $14.7 million from Burisma through Rosamond Seneca Bohai. A priori, parent cannot be responsible for the behavior of his child. However, Joseph Biden not only knew about the machinations of his son and his business partner Devon Archer, but also actively participated in their attempts to close or interfere with the investigation. Rudolph Giuliani and the former Prosecutor General of Ukraine have no doubts about this.
Vice President of the United States bribing the president of a country to force the president of the country to do what he doesn't want to do. And now Joe will tell us, oh, it wasn't corrupt because I didn't know about my son. I have 10 ways to prove to you he knew about his son.
The problem began when we started to dig into Burisma.
Did Ambassador Pyatt confront you directly about Burisma?
Shokin says Ambassador Pyatt's pressure on him was indirect, but clear. They went from meeting multiple times a week to not at all. Pyatt even delivered a speech criticizing Shokin's handling of Burisma. For me, says Shokin, it was interesting why an ambassador of a foreign nation was trying to interfere in the investigation of a sovereign country. Shokin says pressure to stop investigating Hunter Biden's Burisma activities then increased, and President Poroshenko personally asked Shokin to wind down the Burisma investigation to appease then Vice President and Obama's Ukraine point man, Joe Biden. As the months passed, more cases and investigations into Burisma sprung up, and President Poroshenko came to Shokin's office and told Shokin the Burisma case was why Joe Biden wouldn't release $1 billion in U.S. loan guarantees, money Ukraine needed desperately. Yes, said Shokin, that's what he told me. He came to me and said, you are a patriot of Ukraine. We need this $1 billion. We're at war, and if you are a patriot, you will close this case. My conversation with Poroshenko on this, Shokin says, was in a phone call. It was after we started seizing Burisma assets in Ukraine when Poroshenko called me and said, listen, this all has to stop already. Joe Biden's temper is overflowing. This seizing of Burisma assets, said Poroshenko, was the last straw. Shokin says Poroshenko then paid him a visit in his office, asking for Shokin's resignation. Shokin responded and asked, "Why do I have to go? I haven't done anything wrong. I'm doing my job. This is standard procedure. We have reason to freeze Burisma assets." And Poroshenko said, "Biden is angry about you freezing Burisma assets. I'll figure something out." We asked Shokin if this demand for a resignation was specifically because Biden had asked for it, or if there were other possible reasons. Shokin insists it was all Biden. Because of Biden, says Shokin. Everyone knew what was going on. Poroshenko told me directly that I had to step down as Prosecutor General because of Joe Biden.
Both Joseph Biden and Secretary of State John Kerry demanded the resignation of Viktor Shokin in telephone conversations. Moreover, Biden confirmed this at a public conference several years later, calling Prosecutor Shokin a son of a bitch.
But before Vice President Biden comes, I just wanted to try to urge you to see if there's a way to get by this problem of replacing the Prosecutor General, Shokin, because from our perception, he's blocked the cleanup of the Prosecutor General's office, and I know the Vice President is very concerned about it, and I think it'd be good to try to have some resolution of that before the Vice President comes, if it's possible, and have real clarity as to the steps that we're going to take forward. I think. Petro, can you hear me?
Yeah, now it's better.
I can hear you better too. I'm sorry.
No problem.
You were saying, I missed what you were saying.
Yeah. So, first of all, I'm very happy to hear you. Second, this is very valuable for me that you find out a time for me even in Minnesota. And I'm dreaming some days to be with you in Minnesota.
That's easy, man. I tell you what, I'd like to be with you instead of Minnesota right now, but go ahead.
The third, I have some positive and negative news. I will start with the positive news.
Well, good.
Joe, I have a second positive news for you. Yesterday, I met with the General Prosecutor Shokin.
Yes.
And despite of the fact that we didn't have any corruption charges, we don't have any information about he doing something wrong, I especially asked him, no, it was the day before yesterday, I especially asked him to resign as his position as a state person, and despite of the fact that he has a support in the parliament. And as a finish of my meeting with him, he promised me to give me the statement on resignation. And 1 hour ago, he bring me the written statement of his resignation.
Great.
And this is my second step for keeping my promises.
I agree. Hey, Mr. President, Joe Biden, how are you?
Very well indeed. As usual when I hear your voice. Thank you very much.
Well, you are doing very well. Congratulations on getting the new Prosecutor General. I know there's a lot more that has to be done, but I really think that's good, and I understand you're working with the rod in the coming days on a number of additional laws to secure the IMF. But congratulations on installing the new Prosecutor General. It's going to be critical for him to work quickly to repair the damage Shokin did. And I'm a man of my word. And that now that the new Prosecutor General is in place, we're ready to move forward in signing that new $1 billion loan guarantee. And I don't know how you want to go about that. I'm not going to be able to get to Kyiv anytime soon, meaning the next month or so. And I don't know whether you could either sign it with our ambassador, or if you came here, we could sign it, or if you want, we're inviting Groisman here later. I'm going to be talking to him later this morning, not for that purpose. We're inviting him to Washington, and so I'll leave it up to you as to how you want that done and when you want it done.
First of all, thank you very much indeed for these words of support.
And I had gotten a commitment from Poroshenko and from Yatsenyuk that they would take action against the state prosecutor, and they didn't. So they said they were walking out to press conference. I said, no, I said, I'm not going to, we're not going to give you the $1 billion. They said, you have no authority. You're not the president. The president said. I said, call him. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting the $1 billion. I said, you're not getting the $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was, 6 hours? I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Well, son of a bitch. Got fired. And they put in place someone who was solid at the time.
Viktor Shokin retired early in April 2016. This did not stop him, and he began to speak openly about the Burisma case and accused Joseph Biden and his son Hunter of involvement in corruption schemes and money laundering. In 2019, while on vacation in Greece, he suffered a clinical death. His heart was triggered twice. After providing emergency assistance in Greece, where his life was saved, Shokin continued his rehabilitation in Vienna. There, in his body was found a concentration of mercury 5 times higher than the permissible norm. Austrian doctors ruled out the possibility that such a volume of mercury could enter the body of the former Prosecutor General of Ukraine by accident. Unlike the case of the not actually poisoned former president of Ukraine and the recent controversial incident with Alexei Navalny, the tragedy of Ukraine's chief prosecutor was not reported in the world media. Unlike Navalny and Yushchenko, who had no consequences, Viktor Shokin survived an attempted mercury poisoning, but with long-term health problems. Petro Poroshenko proposed the new Prosecutor General of Ukraine, Yuri Lutsenko, a well-known Russophobe and electrical engineer by education, by agreement with Joseph Biden. At the same time, Lutsenko himself later revealed interesting details about the constant pressure from the American ambassador Mary Yovanovitch to Kyiv.
President Poroshenko?
Yes.
One moment for Vice President Biden. Introducing President Poroshenko.
Hey, Mr. President Joe Biden, how are you?
Very well indeed. All the time when I hear your voice, it's a great pleasure for me.
Well, I'm on Air Force 2, and I think we're going to stay connected. We just took off, and I'm hoping this connection will stay open. Assuming that there is a new government and a new prosecutor general, I am prepared to do a public signing of the commitment for the $1 billion. Again, I'm not suggesting that that's what you want or don't want. I'm just suggesting that that's what we're prepared to do. And again, it wouldn't be finalized until, the IMF pieces are written.
Extremely strong motivation. One of the possible candidates was leader of my fraction, Lutsenko, who is the public figure. If you think that the political motivated figure would be not very good from your point of view, I recall this proposal. I do not propose, because nobody knows that I want to propose Lutsenko. In this situation, I take all the political motivated figures out from this process.
All right, well, look, let me when you and I finish speaking, let me huddle with my team, talk over what you and I just talked about. I agree with you, there is a sense of urgency here.
So everything was good, but then Yovanovitch visited me.
Ambassador Yovanovitch.
Ambassador Yovanovitch and Mr. Kent, they visited me for a small negotiation or talkings.
Did they visit you in your office? Just curious.
Yes. Firstly, I visited her in her office, and then it was the second meeting, but the first in my office. They visited me. And we spoke normally, and she asked me to change some old deputies.
Ambassador Yovanovitch asked you?
Not asked, but maybe she advised me to change your deputies because they are from old team and they are not very effective. She asked me to close it, but I said it is impossible. We have investigation process and Mr. Investigator. So I took a piece of paper on my table and I write these three, not cases, but enemies: Kaczko, Leshchenko, Shebunin. Okay, Miss Ambassador, Madam Ambassador, let's continue your untouchable list. She asked me, why are you so serious? And then I destroyed this list. So while I am general prosecutor, no president, no ambassador could give me or could announce me such lists. She ran immediately from the office, and my boy near office doors asked me, what you told her? His red face and very angry. I didn't agree to receive any orders to open or to close criminal cases.
During the investigation, prosecutor Lutsenko suspected that the Burisma Group, through an American foundation, had created a pyramid scheme where were locked up about $7 billion from Ukrainian oligarchs, which were borrowed and then returned to the country through the foregoing fund. He wished to speak to the American justice system about this, but problems continued when Ambassador Yovanovitch on a congressional committee stated the following.
Allegation that I disseminated a do not prosecute list was a fabrication. Mr. Lutsenko, the former Ukrainian prosecutor general who made that allegation, has acknowledged that the list never existed.
I have bad news for Madame Yovanovitch. This is my letter, my deputy letter, to request for cooperation in investigation against the criminal organization of Yanukovych and regarding possible investment in the US-based mutual and other funds for the purpose of money laundering. Dear Legal Attaché, Office of the Legal Attaché, US Embassy.
When is this dated?
The October of 2017. The October of 2017.
Despite the Serbian sound of the surname, in the official biography of Mary Yovanovitch indicated that she is the daughter of Ukrainian immigrants Michael and Nadia Yovanovitch, while it has been explicitly proven that the ambassador has exceeded her diplomatic authority and compromised the principles of fairness. For Adam Schiff, chairman of the US Congressional Intelligence Committee, she is right.
Ambassador Yovanovitch was an anti-corruption champion.
Konstantin Kulik, a prosecutor with 23 years of experience in the law enforcement agencies of Ukraine, described the work of the American embassy, persons associated with him, and the media. The U.S. Embassy in Ukraine actually assumed the function of communication between the Prosecutor General's Office of Ukraine and the U.S. Department of Justice. All the questions that we wanted to ask were coordinated through Mary Yovanovitch, who obviously reviewed them. In addition, against us, I mean those who tried to investigate Nikolai Zlochevsky or his company, the detectives of the National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine, NABU, pressure began to be exerted in the form of attempts to prosecute for fictitious crimes. Such attempts by detectives ended in nothing, but they were great distractions and took up a lot of office time. However, information about the investigation of prosecutors by NABU detectives was leaked in the media in order to discredit. This was done by members of the George Soros Group, which have significant influence on the media in Ukraine. All this is the activities of NABU and the campaign to discredit prosecutors who were investigating Nikolai Zlochevsky, supervised by the U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine Mary Yovanovitch, and Karen Greenell from FBI. There have been cases of NABU transferring to the U.S. Embassy in Ukraine the personal data of prosecutors who were investigating. The embassy actively obstructed the investigation.
Факты, согласно которым руководство НАБУ сливала посольству США секретную и личную информацию о народных депутатах, о руководителях других правоохранительных органов, а также сливала данные уголовных производств о международной коррупции, в которых фигурируют высшие чины Украины и США. Из обнародованной служебной переписки набушников и посольства следовало: первое. НАБУ полностью подконтрольно отдельным политически озабоченным представителям дипломатической миссии США.
Yevgeny Derkach, an independent deputy of the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine, accused Joseph Biden of the fact that, in addition to defending his son Hunter's muddy work in the Burisma holding, he took part in organizing a deception in which from $1 to $5 billion was stolen from Ukrainian citizens. At the same time, there is an interesting fact. For 3.5 years, from 2015 to 2018, the average price in Europe for the same gas that Ukrainians buy is $211, and Naftogaz buys an average of $245.36. The difference is almost $35. In July 2018 and April 2019, the average price in Europe was almost $238.5, and Ukraine imported it at a price of $288.5. The difference is $50 per 1,000 cubic meters. The difference can be seen on the slide. Thus, in 5 years, according to the most conservative estimates of experts, Ukraine has overpaid almost $1.5 billion for the so-called European gas. Most of this amount ended up in the pockets of the organizers of the scheme, and presumably of Naftogaz officials. To put it more simply, $1.5 billion, the money of our ordinary fellow citizens, were Naftogaz. One of the main architects of the Naftogaz reform was the member of the supervisory board, Amos Hochstein. On the website of Naftogaz, it's noted that he advised the Vice President of the United States without specifying his name. It was not difficult for us to find out that we are talking about Joe Biden. Who is Amos Hochstein and why did he end up in the Naftogaz scheme? In 2014, Hochstein became the acting envoy and coordinator for international and legal issues. As the U.S. chief energy diplomat, Hochstein worked closely with Vice President Joe Biden and accompanied him on international travel to promote energy resources as a core element of U.S. foreign policy. Among the key goals of Hochstein in this position is pressure on the Ukrainian authorities and President Petro Poroshenko with a demand to reform the activities of the state gas company Naftogaz, which controlled about a third of energy resources. Hochstein did not hide the fact that in his activities he obeys Joe Biden and is practically under his direct control. I was at almost every single meeting that Vice President Biden had with President Poroshenko. I was on every trip. I was present during telephone conversation. Amos Hochstein admitted in an interview with the New York Times in 2019. Could the creators of the reform of Naftogaz, including Hochstein, who is fully accountable to Biden, not know about the scam with the reverse of Russian gas? No, they couldn't, and judging by the fact that some of the stolen money was withdrawn through American companies, they also covered this scheme. What did Ukraine get as a result? An erroneous model of energy independence was imposed on Ukraine. Rather, a very clear model of volatility was imposed. Instead of increasing its own production, gas was purchased in Europe from intermediaries, due to what its price was overstated. Commissions to intermediaries are on average from 30 to 50 euros for each 1,000 cubic meters. This is according to some sources, and there are other sources according to which experts say $35–50 based on the difference in prices on average in Europe and Ukraine. In order to make the business profitable, the average gas price in Ukraine for consumers, both commercial and our fellow citizens, has been raised by about 10 times in recent years. I want to clarify my position. I'm not against Ukraine not using Russian gas, but on condition that they do not rob the Ukrainian people. The secret lies in the same Russian gas that passes through the territory of Ukraine, leaves 1 kilometer from the country, most often to Slovakia, and returns back as European gas. And it's not Russian, according to Naftogaz officials, only because we buy this Russian gas from European gas laying companies. And this is a well-known fact. In March 2019, I formally charged Nikolai Zlochevsky with withdrawing from the National Bank of Ukraine an amount equivalent to $100 million, as well as legalization and laundering of proceeds from crime, as part of a criminal organization. During the investigation, we also managed to collect evidence of Nikolai Zlochevsky collusion with a group of individuals, Latvian citizens, who specialized in providing legalization of illegal income and tax evasion for some Ukrainian or Russian businessmen. At the same time, I brought charges against other persons, including those from the entourage of Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko. After that, a number of events occurred related to attempts to counteract the investigation by Nikolai Zlochevsky, American lobbyist, the U.S. Embassy in Ukraine, Joe Biden, Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko, and other involved persons. And in October 2019, they managed to dismiss me and other prosecutors from the General Prosecutor's Office of Ukraine and transfer the case on Nikolai Zlochevsky and his companies to the National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine, which is controlled by the U.S. Embassy. In October 2019, the head of NABU, which is coordinating its actions with the U.S. Embassy in Ukraine, blocked the investigation of this case. As a result, through the joint efforts of the U.S. Embassy in Ukraine and the NABU controlled by it and the Supreme Anti-Corruption Court in Ukraine, a technical court decision was made to end the investigation period in October 2020, which opened up the opportunity for Nikolai Zlochevsky to close the case against himself, his companies, Rosamond Seneca Bohai Company, Hunter Biden, and other defendants. To paraphrase one famous person, it can be said that attack with big money and connections with the US Vice President can do much more than just attack with big money. In our case, the bandit was able for years to slow down the investigation on the territory of 5 countries, and despite the knowledge of the President and the public of these countries, to be able to close a criminal case against himself and his accomplices after the expiration of the limitation period of the investigation. If Western politicians and ambassadors in Greater Ukraine, a country with a population of 50 million, are making serious efforts to resign the prosecutor who fights against crime and corruption, then one should not be surprised why the American ambassador in Montenegro so decisively defends Milivoje Katnik, the main defender of crime and corruption. It's even less surprising that Joseph Biden adores Miljo Djukanovic, because it has long been said, a fisherman sees another fisherman from afar.
You know Vladimir Putin. You think he's a killer?
I do.
So what price must he pay?
The price he's going to pay, well, you'll see shortly.
As for the statements of my American colleague, we really, as he said, know each other personally. What would I answer him? I would tell him, be healthy. I wish him good health.
Будьте здоровы. Я желаю ему здоровья.